Welcome to Lesson 2 of Animated Loops. In this lesson, we're going to focus on loop design. We'll finish off designing the character that we started in the last lesson, turning it into a fully functioning rig, which will then animate in the later lessons. But to begin, I'll tell you a bit about why I choose to design my loops the way that I do. If you've ever seen any of my work, you'll know I like circles. They're simple and smooth. A circle is 2D, but it can be made to look 3D very easily, just by adding a simple curve. It can appear to spin just by sliding details across it, and you can do this in any direction. You can also do this with other less smooth shapes too, but it's not quite as simple. By using smooth shapes to begin with, then you're halfway there to making smooth animation. I prefer to keep things simple with the design, but make things more complex with detailed animation and a wide variety in the types of scenes that I animate. Using a very simple flat design style actually makes it very easy to work with lots of different perspectives, giving your animation a lot of depth. Whether for 2D, 3D or isometric, it can work for them all. But while being varied in the types of scenes that I animate, I like to be consistent with the colours that I use. I do this in After Effects by creating a composition that I use as a colour palette. Within that, I use different coloured shape layer squares to build up a palette. I usually create a palette with 2 different shades of each colour, but you could have a palette with 3 shades of each colour if you prefer. Then, when creating an animation in a new composition, I'll just drag in my colour palette composition and pick colours from this layer when designing. This ensures that I'm always using exactly the same values for each colour. You can also set the colour palette layer to a guide layer so that it won't appear in final renders. Which colours you use is completely your choice. My advice would be to start with 2 or 3 colours that you like. Then, as you're creating animations, you can gradually add 2 or 3 more colours as you find that you need them. It won't be long until you have enough colours for designing any scene you can think of. I will sometimes vary these colours a little, particularly for more natural colours, such as skin tones or shades of grey. But I will use just the colours in my main palette 90% of the time. These colours are just my personal choice, but I'd encourage you to create your own colour palette to use for all of the loops you'll be making on this course. Using a consistent colour palette is a great way to make all your different loops feel part of the same collection, making them recognisable as your own. But it's also very important when it comes to exporting your loops as GIFs. This is less important these days as most platforms such as Instagram allow you to post your loops as videos instead. Although on Twitter, for example, posting a GIF will usually result in higher quality compression than if you post a video, so using a GIF is often the better choice. GIFs are limited in the amount of colours they can use, from just 2 all the way up to 256. Less colours means a smaller file size. But even 256 colours isn't that many if your designs have gradients, because every different shade of colour will be a different colour in the palette. If you design using your strict colour palette to begin with, then you'll be able to export your GIF with fewer colours while still looking good. You also need to be careful with how you use these colours too. The other main contributor to good GIF compression is the amount of movement in your scene. A good way to think of this is how often are each of the pixels in your GIF changing colour. If you have a scene with a background that's mostly one colour for the whole loop, then the GIF will compress very well, because most of the pixels never change colour. If you have a fully scrolling background, even just with a simple pattern, then most of your pixels are changing colour every single frame. So your GIF file size would be almost 3 times as big, even with the same amount of colours. This could mean your file size is too big for where you want to upload it to. Instead, when adding scrolling background details like trees, try to make sure there are still large areas that don't change colour very often. Then your file size won't increase too much. This is also something that's important to consider for videos too, as fast-moving detailed patterns often result in blurry video compression. Try to keep things simple. If you can tell the same story with less detail, then that's usually a good compromise for having a better looking loop. Now we know why we're designing the way we are, let's get back to designing our character. I'm going to show you how to rig a very simple character based around a circle, and it's completely fine for you to make the exact same character too. But if you're already an experienced animator, then you could also add some of your own personality into the design yourself. You could make it a character with a separate head and body, or more detail such as clothes or facial features. Even if you do stick to the circle character that I'm making, you can also customize it with your own face design too, or just a different colour. Whatever you choose to do, make sure you think of your character as a 3D object. Even though we're animating in 2D, being able to give your character depth is very important. Just remember to keep the design simple and smooth. See you in the next part. Thanks for watching.